everyone. My name is Elizabeth. Welcome back to part 2 with Lynne Goodwin, making the environmental connections. Lynne, take it away.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all of you that came back. This is awesome. I had a great time with you. What? I'm seeing this as uh-oh.
Okay.
Sorry, we're okay. Are you guys seeing this full screen?
Right when you filled out in the back to me form title health assessment caregivers filled out by the doctor.
We're seeing your screen. Okay, now it is.
Yeah, it's full
And
screen now.
form
Lynne.
title DOH.
Okay.
I believe this is
If
this one.
everybody could please mute themselves if you're not muted.
It's for the doctor to fill out. Please keep in mind that form needs to be filled out in 30 days.
Lynne, you are muted.
You can mute everybody.
I did. Lynne, you are muted. You need to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you go.
Ready to roll?
Ready to roll.
Happy to see all these faces again. So let's do a little bit of practical application this afternoon. Nobody ever what time is it in New York? Is it like 4? People
4:08.
Nobody fights for the 4 o'clock slot, I'm telling you. Nobody. But I'm happy that you guys hung in there with me. So we're going to talk about practical application. We've talked about theory of EP, and honestly, I could do this for 2 weeks. There's a lot of things to unpack, and I'm guessing that when you go out into the world at the end of the day, that you are going to, I hope, maybe see some things through a different lens, and that will be a great start on this. So let's look at some strategies that actually change norms. So we talked about norms can be a problem, right? So what do you do about it? What do you do about it as a coalition? What do you do about it as an organization? How can you impact norms? So the one that we've been talking about pretty consistently is public event gaming, right? So school events, fundraisers that use gaming themes, casino nights, or any kind of gambling instruments or tools. That's an obvious one. We call that low-hanging policy fruit as well. Lots of times that can be school level, school district level. There can be, and that can be for coalitions and groups that are just dipping their toe into the policy world. That can be a great place to start. There's a lot of, we haven't even talked about like some of the really predatory gambling marketing practices, but not only that, but
like breakout
but the predatory lending that also feeds into these places. I saw, gosh, I don't remember where it was, but it was a strip mall that had, it was a state that had gambling was legal, and it had one of those lending places in the same strip mall as this small place that had slot machines. Terrible. But those are the kinds of things that we can look at in our community and start to raise awareness and change how what our community allows. Some other examples of environmental strategies that impact messages are things like engaging media outlets to highlight community changes. So these policies that you're working on, or these things that you want to change, work with some of your local media agencies. They're interested in why this is a problem for our community. They want to know, especially, and they want to know why folks are doing what they're doing. Work with merchants. Work with them directly to reduce lottery advertising in retail environments. We're going to talk about what young people in California do with merchants in retail environments. I mean, obviously for us, this is one of the #1 place that young people are getting direct access to the lottery. Obviously, it's illegal to claim them, but we don't even think that that's being enforced. You can work with casino gambling establishments around sponsorships that include branding. This can be tricky. For us, the casinos that we have in California are run by tribes or indigenous people, and they really do want to give back to the community. They want to put their brand on it in their way. So they want to get their casino logo out there because they want people to know how they give back to the community, that they put money back into the community, and it's important to them from a tribal perspective. So if you're going after any of that kind of thing, you want to make sure that you are, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying work with them so that folks understand. It's way better if they understand how what they're doing can potentially be changing norms in not a positive way for the community, as opposed to just flat out trying to shut them down as far as their sponsorship. Oh. Are you guys seeing my new slide, examples of environmental strategies? No, it's not changing for you? Oh dear.
It's not changing.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why I would have these problems now.
There you go.
Got it. Got it. This is not my first Zoom or my first rodeo. I don't know what's going on. So examples of practices or strategies that reinforce laws and policies. Getting out there and reminding merchants. Again, that goes back to the first one, the access, but compliance can be another aspect. In the first one, in working with merchants, it's more about like that they have a role in the community. We do this work with merchants when it comes to underage drinking as well, reminding them that they have a powerful role in the community when they choose to abide by or not abide by compliance laws. They have a very important role when it comes to the well-being of our communities. Sometimes letting them know the data around. That's why compliance checks can be super helpful. And if you don't know what a compliance check is, it's where you work with law enforcement to go in and see if the retailer will actually sell to an underage person. We do that with alcohol. We are trying to get it moved to doing it with lottery tickets as well. There we go. But that compliance is critical to our community. It also gives us data that's very important in making cases for other things. So for example, when we do compliance checks around alcohol, we're going to go to every retailer in the county, right? And we get, you know, some hard data. If 67% of our retailers are sold alcohol to underage drinkers in that compliance check, that's a significant point of access, right? And we know that that's where we want to get it, where we want to go after it. But there's also other access points for young people, and we'll discuss those in a minute. But vending machine policies. So we talked about, see that vending machine right there? You know, the grocery store I go to has it right by the door. That is no big deal for anybody to walk up to that. Nobody is paying attention, guaranteed. So they can just walk up and pop that out. But you can work with even stores themselves to create policies. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be a policy. It can be an ask. That much, you know, lots of times vendors don't know. And so just making them aware of the statistics in their community, this many folks in our community have been in recovery programs. This many young people report being able to have access to these products. So the monitoring, enforcement, all of those policies are important. And again, you can have your low-hanging fruit or your big deal. So when we're looking at changing the environment, it isn't a one and done thing. It's a continuum. It's a process, and it isn't immediate. It's going to take some long-term vision, but most things that have significant sustainability do require that long-term vision and that incremental process. And so that's why activities to reduce underage gambling are not going to give you any sustainability. They're not going to move the needle on your environmental prevention projects. Actions will. Actions will make the changes that you want over time. So what's the difference, right? I mean, they kind of sound the same. They even start with the same vowel. But activities are more like a task. It's more like a one and done. It's a, when you wash the dishes, it's finished, right? It's done. It's when you have, let's say you have an event and people come to it and they go home. It's done. You hand out, you do some sort of a table and a display. People walk by it, they look at it. That's more individual, but it's done. It in of itself, it's never going to produce an outcome at an environmental level. That's what an activity is. But an action is an act that will get you to a result. And actions never stand alone, if that makes any sense. So this graphic might help a little bit with that. An activity is that task. It's that one and done. Actions are connected to a larger common goal or an impact that you want to feel. Actions always have a linkage, right? So let's say that you want to, do school policy around that eliminates any kind of gambling activity for fundraiser or fun at the school, like nothing gambling related. So the goal would be to create a school policy around gambling. So your first action might be to make presentations to the school board, to educate folks, right? To build their readiness, right? The next thing that you might consider is doing an assessment. How many young people feel like they have exposure to gambling? How many young people feel that are already participating in gambling? That kind of a thing. The next thing might be to have a town hall-like meeting to bring people together to talk about the problem, but more importantly, talk about the solution. Just talking about the problem would be a task, but having that call to action in your town hall meeting, that is going to be a part connecting you to that larger goal. Each one of these actions is an action because it's open-ended. If you were just having a presentation to the school board to educate them about the problem that gambling is and how the gambling activities on the school sites are encouraging unsafe or bad practices, if that was all it was, that would be an activity. But the fact that it's connected to that larger vision of the common goal, that we're going to get policy, because that's the vision when they start, then it's an action. That next one, the assessment, if you just did a survey for the sake of a survey, then it's just an action. But being able to connect that action then to the town hall meeting and sharing those results, that's an action. And they're all linked together. If I were to throw something else in there in the middle, let's say I decided to do to do a compliance check with merchants. What do you all think? Do you think that that would be an action or an activity? Let's see. In this particular case, while I have cited it as a valuable effort, in this particular case, it's not linked to that goal of the school policy, right? It's kind of standing alone somewhere else. So in that way, yes, it would be an action if it was linked to another aspect of the community. But in this, it's kind of standing off somewhere else. It's not going to get us to that school policy, right? The data might be helpful, but it's not going to make the case as much for getting getting the school policy as young people's perception of harm and young people's current engagement with gambling might be. Okay, see the difference? That was a hard one. I'll give you that. That was a hard one. So we're gonna practice a little bit. So let's say you are going to hold a community meeting and you want to hold a community meeting with merchants and share the problem. Is that an action or an activity? What do you think? Drop it in the chat. Action or an activity?
We've got action, we've got both, we've got activity, 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 both.
Gotcha. So for those of you who are putting in activity, can somebody come off mute and tell me why?
If it's connected to the goal of trying to bring about the change at the next step.
You're engaging the community within what you're trying to do.
Okay, those are great answers. You're definitely, I'll be really honest, this was a trick question. But you nailed it based on what I gave you. But the thing that's missing and that I didn't give you is the linkage. So while in theory it should link, we don't have a call to action. We talked to the community about the problem, but we didn't talk to them about solutions. Anybody ever been to a meeting where folks brought everybody to the table and there was a lot of hand wringing, there was a lot of, we showed the data on all the bad things, but we didn't talk about what to do next? We raised the issue, we got people fired up, and then we wasted that fire because we didn't give them an opportunity for a solution and to support a solution, to see an end. So you are absolutely right. I didn't give you that, and that was on purpose. So it's that linkage in between, and almost always it's that call to action, the what next. What differentiates an action from an activity is whatever it is you've planned has that next step already in mind, right? You know where you're going. So yes, if as a standalone, this would be an activity without that call to action, but in that larger goal and talking about the solution, then you've got an action. When you only talk about the problem, you've got an activity. When you infuse potential solutions, you've got an action. Make sense?
So someone in the chat said it's like learning you have a disease but not executing a treatment plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No resolution. And many of you have talked about those meetings where you go and nothing happens, and it's frustrating, and it also doesn't bring you back to the table, because if there's going to be another meeting about that and you're going to still walk out concerned about the problem and feeling helpless, that's not a great idea. So youth do a poster campaign sharing the problem. Action or activity?
Put your answers in the chat box and I will, oh, here we go. Activity, activity. both, activity. Most people are saying activity.
Yeah, I see that. So and somebody said, Carolyn said it can be both. And we'll talk about what some youth that we worked with did to shift it into that action place. Okay, so you are spot on. It is an activity. Again, we're just talking about the problem, right? So if you're talking about the problem and you have a next step that's going to follow that right up, you know, your poster is either going to include information about the town hall meeting that's next, or you're going to follow up immediately with some sort of a solution opportunity, then you can turn it into an action. But rarely does that happen in that paradigm. So what if you were to review an ordinance and discuss ideas with town staff to improve it? So let's say you have a policy. Let's say the policy is that you don't sell lottery tickets to underage young people. So, and you discuss ideas with local town staff to improve it. Is that an action or an activity? Most of you are saying action. Absolutely. Absolutely. It could be an activity if you walk away and it's only here's some ideas. But if your next step then is to move on one of those ideas, then it's absolutely an action. And we're going to assume that that's the intention here. Okay, good job. Not wanting to advance. There we go. So, talked about this before. Conducting merchant compliance checks in partnership with law enforcement. So I'm going to ask you first, I think you guys are already getting this. Is this an action or an activity? Somebody said anxiety a couple times. It could be if you're a merchant. Action. So this is another one that could go either way. So from an environmental aspect, is it environmental strategy? Yes, it is. Because it helps to change the norms. It's enforcement. Retailers that believe that the policies will be enforced are less likely to violate the policies, period. So is it environmental? Absolutely. But it's going to be an action only if it's connected to something else, only if you're taking that data somewhere else. In and of itself, it is not going to be, it's an activity. But nobody should waste that activity. It should be an action. It should never, if it stops there, you've wasted a lot of people's time. Where did that data go? Where did that information go? You can do more. Yes, it's a good environmental strategy and it will have impact in that way. Don't get me wrong. But as far as action versus activity, it is an activity. Okay, merchant visits and educating local merchants on laws and best practices. Action or activity? Action, action. Most of you are saying action. Anybody want to tell me why? You want to come off mute? You can do that too.
Because you're educating them.
Okay.
You're not just observing what's happening, you're giving them the information that they need to make a different choice.
Absolutely. Okay, anybody else? Action, awareness, and education initiative. So Valerie's saying no next step and common goal. So in that the common goal is missing from there. But if the goal is to reduce merchant access, then both of these can fit, right? Both of these can be actions. It's do you have that common goal? And is it linked to something else? So if that compliance check is a standalone and it's not connected to that larger goal, it could be a labor intensive activity. Merchant visits, will they impact the environment? Absolutely. But as far as that larger goal of that bigger impact, the merchant visit as a standalone won't. It's an activity. But you connect those, that larger action of reducing merchant access, now you've got something happening. You've got actions. So yes, in that way, it's awareness, it's education initiative, it's presentation for a solution. Those are all good things, but don't forget about those linkages, okay? Linking them. That's where your impact comes from, right? And because these are all intense efforts, but to get that huge impact, you link them. Oh dear, I've just failed myself. Oops. I don't know what I just did. Okay, sorry about that. Next one. So, access from homes. Okay, this is another place where much trickier politically to tackle. These lots of times the folks that are participating in these are also pillars of the community. So conducting a survey of adults on their perception of the problem of underage gambling. You guys got it. So why is it an activity? And I'll be really honest, these are hard. There can be a lot of debate in the prevention community about these. But the information, gathering the information, that's a great process. But without that linkage, that second, the then what, it's an activity. There's no aim of a solution. So I could change that sentence by saying, conduct a survey of adults on their perception of the problem to use at a town hall meeting. So that linkage to that next place, right? Maybe it could be to even determine whether adult access or social access is where young people or if it's the problem, right? Schools send information to parents about the problem through electronic newsletter. You guys are gonna nail this one. This is a smart group. Schools send information to parents about the problem through an electronic newsletter. Email. You're right. It's an activity. It's another platform for talking about the problem and walking away, right? So your follow-up would be, and then inviting them to a meeting about school policy, right? That would be the next few words in that sentence. They send information about the problem and invite parents to meet about a solution. Like, it's that simple. It's that then what conversation that changes the whole context. Then what? So as you're planning anything, you should always be able to define from the very beginning of the planning, the then what. What is the then what that's going to be infused into that activity that will turn it into an action? And just always using that litmus test is going to be key to shifting your impact in the environment. So is it helpful to think that every action has a reaction? Well, you're going deep at 4:30. Probably. Yes, I think that's a great way to think about it. From both a physics perspective and an environmental prevention. I think it is. I think moving forward. You're right. Activities, you can take it or leave it, right? You can go to a town hall meeting and that frames the problem and no engagement in solution, and you can take it or leave it, right? Especially if you think that nobody else is going to do anything about it. That the activity has to be solution focused for it to become an activity. That's great, Denise. That's another way to think of it. I love that you guys are framing these other ways to say it, like going to AA. I'm just attending, or I'm working the steps. There's a difference, right? Are you checking off the box, or are you working the program? You guys are on fire. Very impressive for 4:30 and on a Wednesday. Very impressive. Okay. So again, just a quick overview of environmental prevention. This will help you maybe remember if you think of the acronym MAPS. So it's media, access, policy, enforcement, and norms. Sorry, social norms. Folks think about that differently. Norms or social norms. That's a whole other debate in prevention as well. But when you're thinking about your actions and activities, being able to pull these planks out of your pocket and know that these are the places you want your actions to affect the right aspect of environmental prevention, right? Okay. So as coalitions, you need to create plans. Action planning is a process and a cycle, especially when engaging young people, that, and for our groups, they use to meaningfully address a problem, a concern, or an issue they face. So action focuses everyone with power to change the environment, media messages, access, the maps, rather than providing services or education directly to individuals. Okay? Another way to think about it. Action focuses on the people with the power to change the environment, rather than services to or education directly to individuals. Okay? Is that another helpful way to think about it? So Canton activities such as sending out the newsletter create an action. Maybe several parents get together to discuss the email and ask the school for a meeting. Yes, Jack, it can, but the way to ensure that it becomes an action is by putting the date and the time for that meeting for parents that are interested in talking more about the problem, right? So you can put out that spark and hope that it turns into a flame, or you can start the fire, right? You can say, here's the problem and here's where we're meeting, or we can say, here's the problem, go. See the difference? And having the date, the time, and the place, that's next step. That's action. Okay. Oops. So, some ways that we engage our youth partners here is a project that we call Betting on Our Future. So one of the first things that, every now and then it does that. Our youth partners have a project cycle, should they choose to this be something that they want to work on. And the first thing they do is a prevalence survey among their peers. They survey their peers, they push out the survey, they make sure that it gets out to different groups in their school, and they ask them about their attitudes, their perceptions, and their experience with gambling, so that they can talk about the problem in real time, in real context. Like, this is my peer group. This is my school in this time. This isn't a survey from 4 years ago. And it's really important when you're engaging young people in this work to build their capacity to understand the problem, but also build their fire. When young people realize that gambling or predatory processes are inflicting harm on their peers, they want to make change. And empowering them to do so by building their capacity is one of the things that we do with the BOOF project. So the first thing we do is help folks to really understand the problem through this prevalence survey. What does it look like in real time in our community? Okay. So based on that on the survey data that young people then work with, they develop a multimedia messaging to raise awareness of underage and problematic gambling behaviors. Okay. So they use PSAs and graphics, and keep in mind, this is not so much a prevention project as it is a engaging folks that are already engaged in problem gambling for solutions. So PSAs and graphics talking about the problem. They do some awareness with things like lottery tickets, gifts with parents, but really helping people in the community to understand where they can get help. Okay, so we definitely are looking more at an intervention aspect here with this particular project. But again, they all have, they all use a specific tagline that California uses. Lottery tickets are not child's play, and it's to remind adults not to give lottery products to minors.
So Lynn, Connie is asking, do you have sample survey questions that you can share?
Sure. Yes. We developed the survey with our evaluator out of one of the universities. Kid drop off, you go, Nicole, be safe. So this is an example of what, but doesn't this one really hit home? It's how many of you, and I'll say it, before I was involved in any gambling work, I put lottery tickets in my teenage kids' stockings. Didn't ever think about it. I'll own it, like 100%. And I think the fact that, you know, and I'm somebody who's been in prevention for a long time, just never thought of gambling as a problem for folks. Didn't know people who had problems with it, and so didn't think that it could be a problem. And it wasn't until I really got into this gambling side of it that I had a few aha moments. So these are some more of the images. So they've created door hangers, lawn signs, and parent pledges. And again, these were not targeted to be environmental, specific environmental change projects. So this is an example of, these are a little bit more prescripted to give young people more opportunities, more choices. In the cycle of this project, there isn't the time for the strategic planning process that would make it completely environmental. We have been shifting in that young people are engaging the local lottery outlets. They're re-educating merchants on state laws and policies. They are trading out posters or signage for that the merchants may have for the ones that they have created, and putting those up in their stores. And they're sharing the practices and the tips to limit accessibility. And furthermore, they're asking them to be aware. They're sharing their survey data. They're saying why this is a problem for our community, and making the ask, don't do this. Whoops. There we go. This is an example of the pledge that they take when young people have made that ask. And it's really specific. It's not a, like, I pledge to not. It's really clear and forces them to kind of think about, you know, checking off each one. Will not sell lottery tickets to underage youth. We will not pay lottery prizes to underage youth. Our staff will be trained to identify false or fake IDs. We will monitor lottery dispensing machines. Signage will conform to requirements, and we will prominently post not on my watch decal and poster. So helping them to become part of a movement, a merchant movement that is united on making sure that they are doing their part to keep our community safe, or young people safe. Here's an example of young people having that conversation and showing them their posters and their work. And you can tell by the look on his face. I love this photo because you can just tell by the look on his face that he's having an aha moment. Like, I think that they've really captured this aha moment with this guy in looking at it. And this is a PSA. So there's some young people that felt really strongly that the PSA was an important thing. And one of the things that's been really valuable in that process hasn't been so much the creation of the PSA, but their work in getting them placed. So getting them placed in movie theaters, getting them placed in, pro bono, having conversations with people that are able, again, those people in power, to get them placed and understand the problem has been really is really an impactful process. It's empowering to young people, and it is bringing the community into that space of understanding the problem. So I'll go ahead and play this video for you. I hope it works.
This is why I love what I do. You get to capture the genuine smiles of others, the frozen moments of laughter, the priceless memories. They're irreplaceable. I wish that everyone felt the same way, especially when a friendship is on the table. You can't put a price on moments like these. I can't ever imagine gambling them away for anything else. Hey, wanna play? No thanks, I'm good.
So again, that's an example of sort of the young people raising awareness, the peer-to-peer. We know in some of our communities, gambling is so much more normalized than just the things that we've talked about. In different cultures, it's a very big part of their culture, of who they are. And so young people, they're crossing over and having those conversations in ways through their peers. So they're bringing folks together and having those conversations through things like this that are really having significant impacts.
We have just a couple more minutes left. There we go. We have a couple more minutes left. If you have any questions for Lynne.
That is what you call the hook. So I would be happy to answer any questions. You guys have been hanging in there a long time and interacting, and what an amazing audience you've been.